It was supposed to be just another quiet evening out, but for one woman, it would turn into a nightmare. Walking into a luxurious restaurant, she was excited to treat herself to a nice dinner. But within moments, her peaceful evening was shattered. The staff gave her cold, dismissive looks, and the manager, with a tone that bordered on rude, told her she wouldn't be allowed to stay. Confused and humiliated, she was thrown out of the restaurant, standing alone in the cold night air. What had she done wrong? What had made her a target of such cruelty? But what no one knew was that this woman wasn't just any ordinary woman. She had a secret, one that would soon change everything. As she stood outside, trying to process the bizarre turn of events, something unexpected happened. A sleek, black Porsche pulled up, its engine purring as it came to a stop. The door opened, and out stepped a man in a sharp suit, her husband. But not just any husband. He was a billionaire, known for his power, influence, and the wealth that commanded respect wherever he went. The moment he stepped foot on the ground, everything changed. The staff who had once treated her like an outsider suddenly began to panic. Whispers spread like wildfire. But it wasn't just about money. There was something more at play here. The question lingered. How would this turn of events unfold? Would the truth be revealed? And most importantly, what would happen to the restaurant that had made such a grave mistake? Stay tuned, because this story is far from over. The woman, still in shock, stood frozen as her husband strode towards her. His expression was calm, but there was a hint of something dangerous in his eyes. She had never seen him look this determined. As he approached, the manager who had so eagerly escorted her out stepped forward, a nervous sweat beading on his forehead. He had no idea who this man was, but the way the staff quickly scrambled to straighten up told a different story. The air was thick with tension as the manager stuttered out an apology, but it was clear he was terrified of the man now standing before him. The woman had known her husband was wealthy, of course. He had always been quiet about it, preferring to live a low-profile life despite his vast fortune. But tonight, it seemed as though a side of him she had never seen was about to come to light. The Porsche, the sharp suit, the unmistakable aura of someone who commanded authority, it was all too much for her to fully process. Who was this man, really? The staff's behavior had already begun to shift. They were no longer dismissive, but overly eager, almost too eager to please. The manager, who had once treated her like an inconvenience, was now apologizing profusely, asking her to come back inside, offering her anything she desired. But the woman couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and disbelief. She had been humiliated, treated as though she didn't belong, and now they wanted to make it right because of who her husband was? As her husband exchanged a few cold words with the manager, she felt a strange unease wash over her. This wasn't just about the restaurant anymore. Something deeper was at play, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the last time their lives would be affected by this incident. What had triggered this sudden shift in the world she thought she knew? And what would her husband's next move be? As the manager scurried to appease her husband, the woman felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had always known her husband was powerful, but this sudden shift in the way people treated her, like she was someone of importance simply because of who she was with, felt strange and uncomfortable. It wasn't just the staff's flurry of apologies that bothered her. It was the realization that she had been invisible before, that no one had seen her for who she truly was. It was as if her worth had always been tied to her husband's wealth and status. Her mind began to race with questions. Why had the manager treated her so poorly? Was it just because of her appearance, or was there something deeper at play here? Was this a simple case of discrimination, or was there something more sinister beneath the surface? She couldn't shake the feeling that this restaurant, this high-class establishment, had a hidden agenda. One that had nothing to do with customer service and everything to do with power dynamics and perception. Meanwhile, her husband, standing with the manager, spoke in a tone that suggested he wasn't just a man of wealth, but someone who was used to being feared. His words were measured, deliberate, and yet the manager seemed to be shrinking with every syllable. It wasn't just a business transaction happening here. It was an exchange of power. The restaurant had made a mistake, and now they had to reckon with the consequences. But the woman couldn't help but wonder, was this really how her life had become? Defined not by her actions, but by the wealth and status of the man by her side. As she watched her husband assert control over the situation, she felt a creeping doubt about everything she thought she knew. Could she continue to live in his shadow, or was it time to step out of it? And more importantly, what would this event mean for their future? The tension in the air was palpable as the woman stood silently by, watching her husband exchange words with the manager. Her mind raced, but her body felt paralyzed. She could see the fear in the manager's eyes, the way he was desperately trying to backpedal, his voice trembling as he offered more apologies than she thought possible for a simple mistake. It was as if her husband's presence had altered the very fabric of the restaurant's world, twisting it into something foreign and unsettling. But there was something else creeping in, something darker that gnawed at her. She couldn't shake the feeling that the manager's desperation wasn't just about making things right. It felt more like an attempt to cover something up, something far worse than a simple act of rudeness. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in the expressions of the other staff members, the ones who had once looked at her with disdain. Now they avoided her gaze, whispering behind closed doors. She could feel it, a murmur of something unspoken, a conspiracy perhaps. Her husband stood unwavering, completely unaware of the storm brewing in her mind. He was the picture of composure, handling the situation with a cold, calculating precision. But there was something about the way he dismissed the manager's pleas that unsettled her. She had never seen him like this, so distant, so detached from her. The man who once shared everything with her now seemed like a stranger, someone who commanded respect without offering any in return. The woman's pulse quickened. She had to know what was really going on. Was this just about a bad night out, or had something far more dangerous been set in motion? As her husband finally turned away from the manager, his eyes met hers. And in that moment, she saw it, the hint of a secret, a world that she was no longer certain she wanted to be a part of. As her husband's eyes met hers, the woman felt a chill run through her. There was something in his gaze, something that made her stomach drop. It wasn't just coldness. There was something else, something buried deep beneath the surface. But before she could process her thoughts, the door to the restaurant opened with a soft chime, interrupting the moment. A man stepped inside, his presence commanding the room instantly. He wasn't dressed in a suit, but there was an unmistakable air of authority about him. His gaze locked onto the woman, and for a split second, she thought she saw recognition flicker across his face. The man walked confidently toward her husband, who, to her shock, seemed to freeze at the sight of him. Their brief interaction, the unspoken tension, the subtle shift in energy, was enough to make the woman's pulse race. She had no idea who this man was, but the way her husband's body language stiffened suggested that this wasn't a coincidence. Her husband's usual calm demeanor faltered, just for a moment, but it was enough to make her question everything. Before she could gather her thoughts, the stranger reached her husband, his voice low and steady as he spoke. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. This was no friendly chat. Whatever this man had to say, it was serious. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she suddenly felt very out of place. She had always assumed she knew her husband's world, that she understood his connections and his power. But in that brief exchange, she realized how little she truly knew. Her entire reality felt like it was shifting beneath her feet, and she had no idea where it would land. What had her husband gotten himself into? And more importantly, what did this new arrival mean for her? The man's voice grew louder, the tension between him and her husband escalating with every passing second. Her husband's usual composure was beginning to crack, and the woman could see his fists clenching at his sides. Whatever this stranger had said, it was having an undeniable effect on him. The woman's mind raced. Who was this man? Why was he making her husband, the man she thought she knew so well, unravel before her eyes? Then suddenly, the man turned toward her. His eyes locked onto hers, and for the first time, she felt a deep sense of fear, real fear, as though something she couldn't see was closing in on her. Without another word, the stranger gestured for her husband to follow him. She watched helplessly as they moved toward the back of the restaurant, disappearing into the shadows. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. She stood frozen for a moment, the weight of the situation crushing down on her. She had to know what was going on. Without thinking, she followed them. The staff, who had been hovering nervously nearby, watched her with an odd mix of fear and curiosity, but no one stopped her. She reached the back of the restaurant just as her husband and the stranger entered a small private office. The door clicked shut behind them, and she hesitated only for a second before pushing it open. What she saw inside took her breath away. Her husband was on his knees, and the man she didn't recognize was holding something in his hand, something shiny. It was a gun. The woman's blood ran cold. "What's happening?" she whispered, stepping forward into the room. Her husband's face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. But the twist came then. The man turned to her, a smirk playing at the corner of his lips. "Your husband owes me more than you could ever imagine," he said softly. "And you're about to find out just how deep this goes." The woman's world tilted again, but this time there was no turning back. The woman stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest as the reality of the situation sank in. The gun in the stranger's hand gleamed under the harsh light, but it wasn't the weapon that scared her. It was the quiet, calculating expression on her husband's face. He wasn't just the man she loved. He was someone she barely recognized now. He owed this man something that had clearly entangled both their lives in ways she could never have imagined. The stranger took a step closer to her, his eyes never leaving hers. "You think you know him," he said, his voice low. "But you don't. Your husband is in deeper than you realize. He's made deals, promises, things that have tied him to people like me." Her mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of this new truth. This wasn't just a matter of wealth or power. This was something far darker, something that had been hidden in plain sight. Her husband, who had always kept his world guarded, had crossed lines she hadn't even known existed. The lavish dinners, the expensive gifts, the mysterious phone calls, none of it had been innocent. As the stranger spoke, it became clear that the money, the luxury, the lifestyle had all come at a much higher cost. But just as quickly as it all unfolded, her husband stood up, his gaze hardening. Without a word, he turned toward the stranger, his voice icy. "You've come to collect, but not today. I won't give you the satisfaction." With that, the man gave a short, cold laugh and lowered the gun, his smile thin. "We'll see about that. You can't escape this." The tension in the room hung heavy, but the woman finally understood. She wasn't just married to a man of wealth. She was entangled in a dangerous game that could destroy everything they had built. The stranger left, disappearing into the shadows of the night, leaving the woman to face the truth about the life she thought she knew. And as she stood there, the weight of the revelation pressing down on her, she knew one thing for certain: her life would never be the same again. What her husband had gotten involved in was a world she wasn't prepared for, but one she would have to navigate as she wanted to survive. The story wasn't over yet. It had only just begun.